ask questions. Public always is invited to be here, but this is probably not the venue for anything other than kind of listening to what's happening here. And then obviously August 18th at the school board public hearing, that will be the time for the public to speak out. But hopefully this meeting will be informative to anyone who has taken the time and effort to be here. So we appreciate you being here. And with that, go ahead.
Yeah. From our standpoint, that video helped explain the premise behind our plans. The other thing I'll just very briefly mention, and then I'll turn it over to question and answer, is we spent the last year bringing together the community in a future school project. And by doing so, we almost, I would say, 80 plus attendees over multiple months, thousands of hours and comments, open houses at each elementary school. And the conclusions were, after reviewing multiple options, year-round school, online school, adding additions, building a freshman center, regrade configurations, A/B schedules, et cetera, and with the growth that we're experiencing, that committee came back and gave us strong recommendations. And those recommendations were build a high school immediately, secure the funds to do that, and then in the next 5 years, understand the boundaries of elementary schools, potentially build another elementary school, and plans for another middle school. So we're in a situation where we have rising inflation or rising interest rates, and we felt this plan was one that gave us the feedback that we heard from the community, gave us the solutions that we heard back from the community. Pay off the bond, use that payment that people are used to paying, utilize current capital funds that you've saved, and lock in interest rates because they're going up. We had another Fed increase by 3/4 of a point today, and we got off the phone with our bond counsel, and he projects that interest rates have gone up almost 1.5 points since we started this conversation. So for every point, it's $22 million. So we feel that there's an urgency around securing these funds sooner than later. So with that being said, we have a group of board members, superintendent, we have Randy from our legal counsel. Who has the first question?
Elected officials, Steve, if you would come to the microphone. Sorry, but it's the best way to make sure everyone can hear.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a few questions. First of all, we've got an existing bond and we're going to pay it off early. Do we not have to retire that bond and the nomenclature and that bond assessment go away with the tax commission? Right now, on our tax bill, we have a set tax levy to pay that existing bond off, and once it's retired, I think that goes away.
It does. You're correct. The bond levy debt service related to the bonds for the high school have been refinanced, closed today. Those will now retire in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
With the retirement of those bonds, it doesn't take any action, but it automatically removes the authorization to charge a property tax for that piece. And so what the school district is estimating right now is that the tax burden for the new high school would fit into that same box beginning in 2025. Does that make sense?
Maybe I don't follow you on that. That's a little difficult to understand, because once you do away with that tax rate to pay that bond off, how are we going to recoup it to make the payments on the lease revenue bonds?
Good question, and I might answer a question you're not asking, but I think it might be helpful.
Okay.
A lease revenue bond does not authorize an increase in property tax.
Right, but it's got to have a source of repayment funds.
It does.
That's got to come from someplace.
It does, and that's why they're being transparent and saying there likely will be a tax burden, but it wouldn't come through the GEO bond tax levy. They are, this school district is well under the legislative maximum amount of their property tax, particularly in their capital facilities.
Mm-hmm.
account. So that would be the budget item that would either be increased or things pushed off in order to be able to make that same payment. At the end of the day, both are a property tax to a taxpayer, but a general obligation bond mandates an additional tax outside of the district's budget.
So, Randy, the payment for the lease revenue bonds is going to come from our general tax fund eventually.
Yeah.
It's just you're going to add it to the tax rate.
Yeah, there will be a debt service payment of the school district in every year's budget. And they will have to budget for that in line with existing capital facilities funds and whatever their budget levy allows, but they cannot go above the already established legislative.
Already established rate. But they still have to go through truth and taxation. That's the only limitation that would be placed on this debt service.
If necessary, after new growth, then yes, truth and taxation could be an option to raise that additional amount. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the question, Steve.
Others? Okay. Did they type in their question? Is it public or an elected official?
Can we get their name?
So we'll need a full name and address for the record. Could you give it, Bradley, I understand you'd like to ask a question. We need your full name and address, please.
Yeah, it's Brad Ellert, 1284 Dutch Highland Drive, Midway, Utah.
Hi, Brad.
Your
Hello.
microphone's on, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, thanks, I appreciate it. And just really quick, so I am a resident of Midway, obviously. My kids go to Wasatch School District, or in Wasatch School District. Professionally, I've been involved in over $5 billion in school construction across the U.S. Not, many projects here in Utah, but also all over, and taken roles as an owner's rep for districts, contractor, manufacturer of products, and have had products installed in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, quite frankly, classrooms across the U.S. And I was also a member of the Future Schools Project on the advisory committee that was mentioned. And so I think the other element is just in all fairness, it was already mentioned that there was a solution about a freshman campus. I was part of the group that helped put together some thoughts on that freshman campus idea and possibly additions. So with that said, so I guess what I heard is the high school bond is going to be paid off early, as in 2024. Does that mean the rate for the general obligation bond will go up for the next 2 years well for that to be paid off?
No, it's actually going down. It went down 20% this year.
Yeah, so that,
So we haven't had a true
So-
taxation for, I think, 5 years.
Yeah, the debt levy for the remaining payment on the old high school bond will not be higher. In fact, there will be a savings in overall debt service to the tune of about $830,000, which was shown in the video. So over the next 3 years, 3 payments, you'll actually save $830,000. Not a big amount to each individual, but certainly not higher than what you're currently paying.
So could part
Okay,
of
so-
why, I'm sorry, but I was just going to jump in and ask, is part of why it's being paid off early because our property taxes have increased? So we got our new bill, right? And the taxes have gone way up, so obviously the percentage that you guys got, while it stayed the same, the dollar amount went way up. So is that part of why it's going to be paid off early?
No, the original bond at the end, so when you do a 20-year bond, the bonds on the end are the highest interest rate. So up front, they're less. Now, right now, we're in an interesting yield curve. Won't bore you with that. But generally speaking, those last bonds have the highest interest rates. So now that we're into those last bonds, you could refund even at today's rates and still save the $830,000 by paying them off early. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay.
Now the 830, as far as an individual property taxpayer, you may see and may even expect a little more savings than the 830,000 spread out because of the new growth. But that's not what we count on when we show those savings. It's just an 830,000, assuming tax values were the same today as they would be over the next 3 years.
Okay, Brad, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
That's okay. So I guess if I'm understanding correctly, so what you're saying is with the market value increase that there was in the properties across the county, you're saying that the tax rate for the general obligation bond went down the required amount that is required in the truth in taxation process. So as an example, across the county, property values increased 50%, but we're seeing a 20% savings in the bond. Is that what you're saying? So you're saying that it did go down the appropriate amount based on the truth in taxation?
No, the $830,000 in savings is indifferent as to valuation. That's the debt service on the bonds. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
So the debt service,
Yeah,
the remaining years have been replaced with new debt service that is less than what it otherwise would have been by $803,000. That's irrespective of increase in market value or pieces like that.
I would mention there's also another, just a smaller factor in play where as we use these debt service levies, there's a small savings account that is added to automatically as that debt service account works, and we have built up a little bit of a reserve there that really our only, as I understand it, the only place we can use that is to put towards these capital debts, and so that money will be put towards helping to pay this bond off early as well. Right. And it's a combination of those things that is making this work out as well as it is for our taxpayers.
Right, and that amount arises because of delinquencies. In other words, if you don't pay your property tax 1 year, then you have a penalty. And when that penalty gets paid, then it automatically is a little bit more. And so that money can only go towards debt service. You don't allow to future to bond or pay an increasing reserve account. And the other part that might be helpful, Brad, is that a general obligation debt service levy is not subject to truth in taxation. It has no bearing. It just takes the county's taxable value and multiplies it times what is needed to provide the debt service in that current year. It's separate from the other property tax levies of the district.
Okay. So if I heard correctly, the intention on paying off the lease revenue bond will be through the capital portion of the normal school district budget. Is that correct?
Correct. It will not be entitled to a GO debt levy property tax authorization. It'll be a balance every year. I don't think the district is committing to imposing that whole burden through truth in taxation, assuming they even have room to do that. It'll be a budget item in every year for the district to make its debt service payment and keep up with its capital needs across the district. Those capital facilities are not just for new buildings, they're also for maintaining existing buildings.
So in 2025, after the bond is paid, the general obligation bond is paid off, even though the overall dollar amount that you're suggesting won't go up, it will be a change of where that money is actually going. So when people see their property tax bill, they will see the elimination of that or a reduction in the general obligation bond portion of their tax bill, but they will see an increase in the school district levy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's what the district is anticipating. Calculating it would be impossible until they get there, right? I mean, that's just a budgeting of every year. The school board goes through a budgeting process, but they would anticipate, for sure the GO debt service levy is going to go away. How much the capital facilities goes up remains to be seen, depending on both new growth and budget needs.
Okay. And then And then I heard it mentioned that the high school was gonna cost $160 million, but the district only went out for $150 million lease revenue bond. Is there a reason why $150 million was chosen versus doing 160?
I'll answer that. I think the original intent, I'll just give I think this is good information to kind of see how the board got to where they're at and why they did what they did. As we was trying to figure out how to make this work, I think everybody understands the overcrowding problem that we have and the need that we have. And as the board was trying to figure this out, they initially started talking about a combination of a GO bond and a lease revenue bond. And as they were having these discussions with our bond counsel, Randy present, and also our bond advisor present, as they were trying to determine how much GO bond and how much lease revenue bond, the current inflationary conditions that we find ourselves in, and also this interest rate thing with the feds being very open, which they haven't always been, and projecting these increases month to month into the future. I'm going to speak for Randy, and he can back this up or not. But Randy and Matt, our bond advisor, said for a board to be fiscally responsible and do the right thing, you need to go really heavy on the lease revenue side, because otherwise you're going to be locking this rate in February, and it could be up another point or who knows. As we look backwards, the last 6 months was over a full point, 1.3. Today we had 0.75 announced, and it's not a direct correlation, but there is some correlation. And so that was the decision that was made, is the 150 lease revenue, and then possibly coming back again with another 10 million GO bond to give the. And I'm not saying the board's committed to do that, but that's something that they're considering. Is that fair enough to say, board members?
Yeah,
I think
go
that's
ahead.
fair
Go
enough.
ahead, Mary Ann.
I'll speak to that as well. The intent of this board, and I'll speak for myself, the intent is to never, we have our legal obligation to provide education for these kids. We have massive growth. We have property tax issues that are being fixed. We have inflation. If we know we have to build this second high school that was recommended by GSBS, that our survey is showing people support, if we can save enough in just interest payments alone to possibly build a school or two in the future, for us, we wanted to be fiscally responsible, but we also wanted to give the public an opportunity to speak up. But that doesn't come until November, and that pushes us bonding in February. So if we do the biggest chunk now, we can save between $10 and $47 million. That's huge.
Yeah.
We know from GSBS that we are going to need another elementary school and another middle school.
That pays for the elementary school right there, and some.
So for us, we know we have to build it. We have to secure the funds. We want our voters to have a say. So we only did lease revenue for 150. And like Paul was saying, that's where it is right now. We have to decide in August if we're doing the GO bond. That was the intent when we did this.
And so your public comment's very helpful.
Our estimates for the school came in very similar, as was mentioned by our guest earlier. It does have a contingency on top of that, which is about $5 million of the 160, and maybe a little bit of breathing room built in. Very, very similar. Our experts that we use to work through these formulas as to what the school was going to cost would have been spot on with what we heard earlier.
Yeah, 2 days ago, the interest rate, not the interest rate, the square footage is $380 to $390. When we went back, 2019, it's $100 less. And so if hindsight's 20/20, but the failed 2019 bond has cost taxpayers I mean, if you look at the interest rate over 20 years versus 30 years, you look at the cost per construction, $100 million. And we would have an elementary school down the street, brand new, open, and we'd have a high school that would be built and open. And so I don't know too many things that continue to go down in price, but I sure know schools continue to go up. And so we feel that urgency. We feel that we missed an opportunity, and we've taken responsibility for that as a board. So we've reached out to the public. We've reached out and we've brought in a third-party expert to help us with guidance and direction. We've brought in specialists for legal and financial, and we feel that this is the best fiscally responsible option for this valley at the current time. And it is something that, you know, we're reviewing the Taxpayers Association's website, and there's statements in there that clearly say if you're able to pay off the current bond, and if you're able to look at ways to not increase taxes, the Taxpayers Association will support it. Now, if that's different, we'd love to continue to have that conversation at the public hearing or outside of, you know, our doors are always open, our phones are always ready at the ring, and so we're excited about this. This is what the public wanted. So we put a plan together to help not increase taxes and build a second high school.
Well, and Brad, I know you're online, hopefully you can still hear us. I know you were on the GSBS committee as well, and even if you look at the numbers we had to use in April, those numbers are no longer accurate just because of the increases. So we have to keep that in mind. Our other bond council phrased it as we are aiming for a moving number 3 years in the future, and we're doing our best. And so that's the 160, the lease revenue is 150, because we still wanted residents to have a say, but we wanted to utilize and take advantage of these interest rates through lease revenue to save the taxpayers more money.
And things are so moving every day. It's just, this is a way to get us some security. And feel very strongly moving forward. There was some discrepancy about the timing we passed this, that we were unified as a board to do it. And I just want to say we've been very unified in understanding this. And the video points out very clearly on our intent. And excited about moving forward with this possibility.
Any other
So if
questions? Go ahead, Brad.
Sorry, so is the intent for the new high school to be, is the intent for the new high school to be the same size as the current high school? Is that the plan for that?
There's several things in play there, Brad. I think that it will be similar, yes.
Our first job is to secure the financing and further discussion.
Yeah, we're putting together a committee, an architectural committee. You're welcome to join, Brad.
Well,
Thank you.
so what is the size of the current, what's the size of the current high school? Do you guys know that?
It's about 330,000, approximately.
I know it's in the
Okay.
The building itself, we obviously have all of West Campus and several portables.
Hey, Brad, we'd love to sit down and talk to you, but we're going to try to move on and see if anybody else has other questions, like Mayor John.